to this computer.
This meeting is being recorded.
All right. So today, our meeting is going to be, it's for caregivers of people, of course, with Alzheimer's and other dementias. We're going to be discussing, it's called the Caregiver Project. And if you look over in the chat, you'll see where I put the conversation project link where you can go on. And then there's a link to the presentation as well that we're going to have today. And so this really talks about having conversations with your family, with your loved one, and including yourself on care all the way through to end of life, so that the wishes can be both respectful and understood of the person you're caring for. And not just by you, but by family members too, who oftentimes don't understand the decisions or the choices that we're making for the people that we love. And they're in a position where they want to tell you how to do things, but they're not there doing the care. And so if they can be part of this conversation, then I think it will help them understand the decisions that you make, and then ultimately let them know that it is up to you as the caregiver, how you move forward from the conversations that you've had with the person you're caring for. You know, people always say, well, end of life conversations, or conversations of care through the rest of your life, it's too soon to have that conversation, right? But it's always too soon until it's too late. And then you wish you had had those conversations sooner. So today we're going to go over steps on how to have that conversation. And we're going to talk about preparing for it, because you can't have a conversation about end of life care, dementia care, healthcare, any of those things if you're not prepared before you have it. They are not off the cuff conversations that just happen naturally or organically. You have to be ready to have that conversation. Then we're going to talk about how to talk about it, how to talk about it with the loved one, how to talk about it with your family members. Then we're going to talk about how to advocate on behalf of the person you're caring for. And then we're going to talk about learning from others, which is why we're here, right? That's why we come to Caregiving Cafe. We want to learn from others and figure out the best way for us to move forward on advice, possibly from people who have already walked in your shoes, and do what's right for you. So that being said, I'm going to share my screen. And as I said, this is the conversation starter. So this is for caregivers of people with Alzheimer's and other forms of dementia. I'm going to do a lot of reading from this, because as I went through it to prepare, there's really nothing I could cut out that wasn't super important. I want us to have an open conversation and jump in throughout this presentation, because that's what this is about, right? It's about conversation starters. And we don't need to hold our thoughts through this conversation, because it's important that we have a discussion throughout the presentation. So the conversation project, I highly recommend that you save or write down the link in the chat. Lynn will also send that out. This is available to you to save and download to your computer and work on with your family and at your time. As a matter of fact, this morning I saved it to my computer for me to work on later today for myself to go through with my family. So they want to help everyone talk about their wishes for care through the end of life, so that these wishes can be understood and respected. We know that it can be hard to start conversations about healthcare through end of life with someone that you care for. It can be even harder when the person you care for has Alzheimer's disease or some other form of dementia, especially when they begin to lose their memory and their capability to independently perform routines, daily tasks, and their reasoning ability. That's really the hardest part, right? When you can't have a rational conversation with the person you're caring for. So dementia can, and I say this all the time, you can have 10 people in the room with a diagnosis of dementia, and all 10 people will present differently at different times. They'll have very similar situations, but we can't predict when or how or any of that. So dementia can progress unpredictably. As it develops, it will become harder for every person that you care for to express their wishes for care. Having conversations early and often can help make the discussion for this person easier later on, and the decisions easier as they come. If you know what their values and their wishes are, you will be better informed to make healthcare decisions on their behalf. That's why it's best to start the conversation before any treatment discussions or decisions need to be had or made. Sometimes we might avoid the conversation by telling ourselves it's too soon. As I said, it's always too soon until it's too late. Caring for someone with dementia is a long-term commitment. We've all had this conversation this morning, right? You're in it for the long haul. So it can present many challenges. And this is a guide that was created to help you as a caregiver prepare yourself and others to make healthcare decisions for the person that you're caring for as the need arises. Okay. So these are the steps again that I said we're going to go through: preparing, talking, advocating, and learning from others. When you're completing this document, you can save it like I did to your desktop, and then be prepared to work on it as you have the time to work on it. And then you'll be ready for the conversation when you've done that. So understanding Alzheimer's and dementia. Of course, Alzheimer's and other forms of advanced dementia are diseases. But unlike other serious diseases like cancer and heart disease, dementia affects thinking and behavior. Dementias are terminal in nature, which means people with advanced dementia will usually die from health problems caused by this disease. Some people may not understand that dementia is a terminal illness. It can help to think about a person who dies from cancer. And I thought this was a really great way, because when I talk to people all the time, they'll say, well, they're perfectly healthy if not for this memory thing. Well, this memory thing isn't just the issue. It's a brain disease. And as everything that is done by the portion of the brain that dies, as that portion of the brain dies, so does the functioning that goes along with that part of the brain. So it's not just this memory thing. It's much more serious about that than that. And so it helps to think about the person who dies from cancer. If they had an infection or an eating problem in the last few weeks of life caused by the weakness of their body from fighting cancer, you would still say the person died from cancer, right? You wouldn't say the infection took them. It was the cancer that they had that led to that. In the same way, people with dementia often have infections. How often do we hear that they've stopped eating and stopped drinking, right? At end of life, and their bodies become weaker. But dementia is still the major illness that led to their death. It's the reason why they're not eating and drinking.
Oh, I'm sit here for this too.
What's that? Oh,
I'm sorry.
oh, that's okay. I thought you were asking me a question.
No, I'm sorry. Ken came in and he's sitting down. So I asked him if he wanted to join.
Oh, good. All right.
You want to sit here? Okay, I'm sorry, Dura.
That's okay.
Sorry to
No,
interrupt.
that's what, hey, like I said, we're all here to help each other. So if somebody's coming in the room that wants to join, that's not a bad topic for him to be a part of. So step one of this conversation is prepare. As I said, this is not a conversation that's an off the cuff conversation, because when you're talking about your wishes for the rest of your life as it pertains to your health care and your life, it can go sideways fast if you don't have a plan on how you're going to have that conversation. So getting ready to talk with someone you care for about their wishes through end of life means putting your ideas together first. You don't need to have the conversation until you have the plan. And so here are some helpful ways to think about it. What if I feel afraid to talk? It may seem unkind to suggest to the person you care for that they're losing their mental ability. It's normal to be afraid when you see clues and hear that they have an illness. They may feel alone, or you may be worried that the person you care for could be in denial, depressed, or angry at you for talking about this. Those fears about the future can make delaying a conversation until the next time feel much more comfortable. It seems easier to talk to the person. It seems easier to talk when the person isn't there, or to pretend that the memory problem is just normal at their age and stay in denial. You may want to protect yourself and the person you're caring for, and that's understandable. These feelings are common among people in your situation, but it's important for the sake of the person you care for to start the conversation now. And I hear people all the time say, well, I'm forgetting things, but that's normal, right? That's just part of getting older. Part of getting older is some forgetfulness. How you can really tell when it becomes a problem is if you can't track your way back to the original thought. So I go into a room looking for my keys. I'm walking that room and I'm like, what was I here for? I can't remember. That's a very natural thing, right? But if you stand there and you go, okay, what was I going to do? Oh, that's right. I was going to leave and go to the grocery store. I'm here looking for my keys. You track your way back to the original thought. That's normal forgetfulness. What's not normal forgetfulness is you walk into that room for your keys. You were going to go to the store and you forget where you were going. You forget where your keys are. You can't express what you were wanting to do. That's not normal forgetfulness. And that's where you maybe need to look into, is there something else going on? Do I need to talk to a doctor and see if a neurologist and see if there's something more going on? So what if they insist that there's nothing wrong? How often does that happen, right? Especially as somebody starts to progress with their diagnosis, you'll hear all the time, there's nothing wrong with me. It's just normal. Or that doctor's crazy. I don't want to see that doctor anymore. That doctor doesn't know what they're talking about. Or you're just trying to take advantage of me. You just want me to do X, Y, and Z. It's very common that as the disease progresses, even in early stages, they're in denial. They recognize something's wrong, but they don't want to accept it. So everybody else is the problem, not what's actually happening with them. Sometimes it's difficult for people to talk about a terminal illness. This can be especially true for someone who was just diagnosed with dementia. Denial is a very normal way to cope. They may insist that there's nothing wrong with them, and they may be suspicious for the reasons that you're having the conversation. It's best to gently make clear that the conversation is for everyone, not just for them. It can help the conversation if it goes both ways. If you're both talking about your wishes and your care, how you want end of life, not just them, not just I want to sit down, Ken, and talk to you about what we're going to do for you, but I also want to talk about what I want, right? Then it takes off some of the fear that this is what you're seeing happening to me. And it's more, we're addressing something that could happen to either one of us. And so let's be prepared for what the next steps are when that happens. And if that happens. So you can also ask if they would rather have someone else that they trust make decisions for them, if not you. And sometimes it's easier to step away and let somebody else, maybe a child or somebody else, make those decisions because you're too close to what's happening and it's hard for you to do it. So what if they react negatively or think that you're trying to upset them? There is no right way that people with dementia think about or react to their symptoms. Some may be in denial while others may worry privately. Many people who have thinking problems or memory problems, whether that means losing their way home or forgetting how the remote works or figuring out how to pay bills, they feel afraid. They may also feel very vulnerable and lonely as this disease progresses. Start a conversation about care through the end of life isn't mean and it's not rude. In fact, it's the most meaningful way that you can show the person that you care about them and that you're going to be there for them. By listening carefully and respectfully, you can share their worries and reassure them that even when they lose their ability to make their decisions, you will speak for them. You will respect their wishes, and they will continue to have their wishes heard through you. You're not alone. This is normal to feel afraid. It's normal for the person you care for to feel afraid. And the conversation shows the person that you care for that you will be there for them. So tips, before we get into tips for talking to somebody, does anybody want to comment or talk about anything I just said? No? All right. So tips for your talk. People in the early stages of dementia will often share that they're nervous about losing their memory and their ability to do things that they used to be able to do. It's important not to ignore this. For example, by saying, "Oh, Dad, we all forget as we get older." In fact, saying something like, "Tell me more," can be the beginning of an opening for a longer conversation. Even though dementia makes a person lose their thinking abilities over time, there might be moments when that person that you care for can remember certain things, like music or older memories. Better the more recent events, like what they ate for breakfast. Use these moments to continue the conversation and ask more questions about their healthcare wishes. When someone is living with dementia, it's important to approach a conversation about their healthcare in small pieces. Remember, they can't carry on long conversations anymore. And what we normally hear in sentences with a healthy brain, a full sentence, there may be catching every few words and understanding every few words, so that as we speak, it begins to make less sense. So you want to keep your conversations short and in small pieces and make it simple. People living with dementia may need more time to process complex information. Too much information, too fast, it can all be overwhelming. So it's better not to go through too many pages of this guide in just one conversation, but instead return to it the next time. And it can be helpful to review the information that you did first, that you did before, and then go and talk about the next part. Having a conversation about healthcare through end of life may be difficult for you too, as a caregiver. It can be overwhelming to think about losing your loved one, especially 53 years, 50 years, 43 years. That's a long time to think about, losing your loved one. But it's important for you, just as it is important for the person you're caring for. It can help you feel less guilty about the decisions that you're going to have to make. It'll help you feel less uncertain. You'll be more certain about the things that you're doing and worried when you make decisions for the person you care for, since you will know what they wanted. You're doing your best, the best that you can to care for someone. It can also help to share the experience with someone you trust, who can listen and offer ideas. As a caregiver for a person living with dementia, what do you need to think about before you feel ready to have the conversation with them to discuss all the way through to end of life? And so I highly recommend, like I said, save this to your computer. You can actually click on it and you can start typing into it, and you can put for you, because it's different for everybody. We all have our own individual fears, our own individual needs and thoughts. Like I said, 10 people can have this disease and it can progress in 10 different ways. So for you, sit down and think about your wishes. And Lynn and I, we were talking as we were preparing for this conversation today, and we were talking about that family member that has a very hard time in letting go of giving advice on how to care for a loved one, but they're in Florida and you're in Texas and you're taking care of them and they're on the beach telling you how to do it. Well, this is a great way to involve everybody, even if they can't get to Texas and you want to have a Zoom conversation and pull this up and say, as a family, I want us to be able to open the door for a conversation about these healthcare needs so that we all understand what's happening and we understand what the wishes are as best we can describe them now in the state that he's in right now, right? And then everybody understands, and then make it very clear. However, while I want you guys to be a part of this process and I want your input and I want you to hear what we're talking about, understand at the end of the day, I'm the caregiver. I'm the one that's taking care of the person we all love every single day. And I will do what is best for the person that I'm taking care of based on the conversations we've had on what his wishes are. And be very firm on that, and don't feel guilty about that. You're including them because you want them to understand, but don't let them derail your plans, because what you're doing as the caregiver is ultimately what needs to be done for both of you. Remember, there is, for caregivers, 60% of caregivers taking care of somebody with dementia will pass away before the one they're taking care of passes
That
away.
scares me. That always scares me to hear that.
Yes. And it is a high percentage, right? But the stress that people feel, especially with this disease, and the guilt that they feel and all of those things, it's very common. And if you're not taking care of yourself, and if you're not insisting that people respect what you're doing, sometimes you might need to just cut those people out and say, I love you. But unless you're going to come here and help, I really can't have you participate in these conversations anymore. So maybe we talk about other things, but when we talk about this, I'm going to have to hang up, kind of thing. You need to be very firm on your boundaries, because those boundaries are to protect you, and they're to protect your loved one. Okay. No matter how much the other person loves them. So the talk, helping someone with dementia have a say in their healthcare is easier if you and others who care for them know how they might feel about certain situations that could come up in the future. It can help to approach the conversation in different ways depending on what stage of the disease that they're in. So we all know there's three different stages, right? Early, middle, and late. For someone in the early stages of dementia, the questions below are a good place to start, which we'll go over. As the caregiver, you can encourage them to review the questions and to help them talk about what matters to them and their care through to end of life. And it's important that you have that conversation through to end of life, because a lot of times we want to stop short of, well, what do you want to do when you get to the place that you're not breathing anymore? You can't eat anymore. You can't drink anymore. Hard things to talk about. So we stopped the conversation just short of that. And we know what they wanted right up until that point. And then you're left, or your children are left, to make decisions that you didn't have the conversation for because it was a scary part of that conversation. So the words through end of life is very important at all stages. When you're having this conversation, it has to be all the way through to end of life, so that you can make those decisions all the way through to end of life. All right. So the middle stage, in the middle stage of this disease, there will be moments when it's still possible to remind the person with memory loss about their experience with someone at the end of life. Remember when grandma died? That's Yeti. Hold on, y'all. I'm sorry. I have to mute myself and get him out. Sorry, he wanted to participate.
That's okay.
He had something to say.
He did. All right. So at this point, it helps to help them remember when grandma died, how they felt about it. How did you feel when that happened? And their preference for their own experience. Those are very natural conversations. They're easy door openers without even making it seem like you're having a conversation. It just naturally flows into that, but you are ready to then continue that conversation further all the way through to end of life. So it's a good time to review the questions that we're going to go over, and then make sure that you understand the preferences. And then there's later stage dementia. And this is when the individual that you care for can no longer express their decisions or their wishes. It can be helpful to think about how the person you care for lived their lives. It's also helpful to think about what their values and their wishes have been expressed in the past as you and others make decisions for them. You and others, including family members and trusted friends, can also review the questions below and help think about it. So what if the illness is so advanced that the person I care for can't answer these questions? The following questions and scales will help you understand the wishes of the person you care for, whether they're able to answer them with you or not, based on their past wishes. So first, finish this sentence. What matters to me through end of life is, and these, we don't have to share this right now. These are just, again, as I said, save it to your desktop. It requires some thinking. It requires time to actually sit back and think what matters to you. So you're not going to be able to answer these right now necessarily. You need to think about them. But then, so for example, here, being in the hospital receiving treatments, being able to spend time with the people who matter most. That's what matters through end of life for this example. So sharing your what matters to me statements with those you care about could be a big help down the road. It can help communicate healthcare wishes to the team and what abilities, such as taking care of yourself, doing activities you enjoy, what's most important to you, what's worth pursuing treatment for, and what isn't. What are the most important things you and your family and friends and healthcare team to understand about what matters most to you through end of life. Again, it'll be different for everybody. So I started just kind of, Lynn and I were going through these, and we had very different responses to what these questions were. So as the disease progresses, I would like to know, for me, I said, because, and again, I don't have a spouse, right? Y'all have a spouse that you're caring for. So when I read this, I'm thinking about my conversations with my kids about what my needs are. And your needs personally, if you do this for yourself, may be different than what your needs are for the person you're caring for, right? So there might be different answers depending on where you are and who you are and what you're doing as you're putting this together. So as you're preparing it for yourself, your answers may be different than as you're preparing it as a caregiver for your spouse. So the first one, I said, I want to know everything about my condition and my treatment. And I believe you said the same thing, Lynn, right?
Yes, I did.
Yeah. Here's where we start to get a little different. So when there's a medical decision to be made, I said, I want my healthcare team to make all of my decisions, because I know, and what was funny, not funny, funny, but when Lynn and I were talking about this before you came on, Sharon, the thing I said is, we all know somebody with cognitive impairment, when they had their wits about them and they expressed what they wanted, and then as the disease progressed, they said, well, that doctor's crazy. Well, I didn't want to do that. They forget what they wanted when they were of sound mind, and that changes, and it changes drastically to where they think they're going to make the decisions that are best for them, that could be very different than what they did when they were of sound mind. And it's hard not to go back and say, well, okay, this is what you want now, but you have to remember they're not of sound mind now. When they were of sound mind, that's really what those wishes were about. That's what those conversations were about. And that's where you can also talk to family members and say, I know you don't understand because he's saying this right now, but when he was of sound mind and he had a rational, lucid conversation, we discussed these things. And that's where I'm basing my decisions on right now. And so having these conversations like this now and going through this together with your family will help you not only know what you're doing for yourself or your loved one, but it'll also help aid you in those discussions with those family members that just don't understand and may never understand. It then again goes back to, this is why I'm doing what I'm doing for the person I'm caring for. I appreciate your opinion, but again, I'm making these decisions based on what we discussed. So I'm not going to go through each one of these. You can go through each of these on your own as you scroll through this, but there's some really great questions, and think about your responses to all of them, because you don't just necessarily want to answer off the cuff. Think about why you answered the way you answered, and write that down too. That's important. Okay. So as a caregiver, this is not about your opinion. It's best to think about and write down what the person you care for would want. It can be helpful when you think about it. When you think about it and ask, how would this person answer this question? What matters most to them? You can also think about past situations where the person you're caring for has gone through and how they reacted or what they said about it for clues. Here are some questions you and others caring for this person can ask. Would they worry about not getting enough care? Or they would get overly aggressive care? Would they be okay with spending their days in a hospital? Or would they really want to spend their last days at home in a home-like environment?
Excuse me, Dura. I'm so sorry to say that I'm going to have to shut down now because I have a home person here to come look at the house. So I'm going to definitely go online and follow through with this because this is very important to me to hear. So I'm just going to say goodbye, and I'll look forward to seeing the rest of this. And thank
All
you.
right, bye.
Well, hopefully not too far distant.
All right,
Being here. Have a
Thank
good rest
you
of the
again.
day. All right.
bye. All right.
Bye, Linda.
Bye-bye.
So would they be okay with spending their last days in a hospital, or would they really want to spend it at home or in a home-like environment? Would they want us to take care of all their needs ourselves, or would they want us to get some help from professionals? Would they prefer to be alone most of the time, or would they prefer to be surrounded by people that they care about? What are the 3 most important things they would want us to know about their wishes for care for them through the end of life? What were they especially worried about? What was really important to them? What kinds of treatment would they want and would they not want? That's where those DNRs and those advanced directives come into play. Very important. If you don't have them, you should have them. All right.
Always get them, right? So
That's right. So sometimes people like me are better at giving advice than taking it. But, you know, again, like I said, I just save this to my computer so that for what I've been telling people to do for years, I'm actually going to take the time to do. So it's easy to put off. It's easy to put these things off because especially when you feel good. And if you're not taking care of somebody else, for yourself, it's easy to put it off, but anything can change in the drop of a hat for any one of us. So we should all, for ourselves, for people we take care of, we should all take the time to do this and have this on hand to make it, if for nothing else, to make it easier for the people we love so that they're not having to make decisions for us. Some more tips for your conversation. Thinking about these topics and recognizing the wishes of the person you care for will help guide and protect you as you make many decisions ahead. Keep questions and statements simple and specific. If they haven't already, now is a good time for the person to choose and name a healthcare proxy. The proxy is the person who can officially make medical decisions for them once they can no longer make those decisions on their own. They can also record their wishes as part of advanced care planning. And you can click on this when you go on the website. You can actually click on this link right here, the guide to choosing a healthcare proxy, and it'll walk you through that. So this is the most helpful site I've ever been on, and I've been on a lot of sites. So step 3 is advocating. Once you have a good idea of what matters to the person you care for and what their wishes are, you will be able to advocate better on their behalf. This means making sure that the healthcare team knows what's important to this person. The healthcare team may include your doctors, your nurses, your assisted living staff members. I'm going to add to that family members, friends, and others. Advocating for the care of someone with dementia can be challenging. You may feel overwhelmed by navigating the healthcare system to care for that person through the end of their life. So many people find this part very overwhelming. What's the difference between independent living and assisted living, skilled nursing, memory care? How do they get paid for it? If you don't work in this industry, it's forever changing, and it's very hard to understand. Seek help from people who can help walk you through that. You're not expected to know everything, and you've got enough on your plate as a caregiver, taking care of the person that you love, that to try to take the time to figure all this out on your own when there are a lot of people out there who already know it and can help you, myself included. Count on those people that are professionals that work in this industry to help you. Whether you sign up with me on hospice or not, that's only a part of what I do. And it's a part of most people in our industry, in the healthcare industry. Whatever we do is a small part of what we do. Our main goal every day that healthcare providers get up is to make sure that the people that need our help with the areas that we are experts in receive our help. Whether you ever become part of our patient team or whatever, the people we're caring for. So don't think that asking for help obligates you to anything other than receiving the help you need. Okay. And I feel like that's important to say, because a lot of times people don't want to talk to professionals because they think they're just trying to get us to become an admission for them. And that's really not what most of us are trying to do out there. Okay. So sharing who the person is important when you're thinking about advocating. It helps the healthcare team see the person in front of them, not just a patient. And that's important because healthcare people see so many people all the time that sometimes they can become numb to the person and they're treating the disease. And Lynn has said this 100 times. even as a caregiver, your spouse or people you're taking care of will say, stop treating me like a patient. It can become a very natural thing to see the person you're caring for as a patient and not the person. And remember, there is a person in front of you, not a disease. The disease is what's causing the problems. That's what's in making you a caregiver at this place, but there's a person that you're taking care of. And it's important that they always feel like a person, not a disease and not a patient. That's why having meaningful encounters every day is very important for somebody with dementia. Okay, giving them jobs, giving them the opportunity to do things that they're able to do, even if they don't do it well. It doesn't matter. It's not about the outcome. It's about the process. It's about them being involved. So making their wishes clear, help the care team know and respect the wishes of the person that you care for. For example, write down their wishes and share this document with your family and your friends. The people who work in assisted living facilities, doctors, and other members of the healthcare team should also know this information. If the person lives at home, you can put the document noting their wishes in a colorful labeled envelope on the refrigerator for emergency care responders if needed, or in a place where you know they'll see it. To help make sure that the wishes of the person that you care for are known and respected as much as possible. It's important that you advocate frequently for them with their healthcare team. You can find many more helpful tips on how to advocate on Alzheimer's Association website, alz.org, or you could just click on it right here when you open up your guide and save it to your desktop. For more information on advocating for the person you care for, visit this. So again, if you don't hear anything else, hear me when I say save this to your desktop, because it takes away a lot of the searching. You just click on these links, okay? And lastly, we learn from others. So you're now prepared to talk with someone who is living with dementia. You had a conversation and thought about the wishes and learned some of the ways that you can advocate for them. Now, here's some advice from people who have cared for their loved ones living with dementia. And I'm not going to read through all of these. This is when I recommend that you go on again, save it to your desktop and look, because there's conversations from family members, social workers, doctors, spouses, and other partners. It's important to keep talking and talk to anyone who can help the person you care for have a say in their care. The role you play in this person's care is very important and will help them live their best life possible. And that last page just has more links to the conversation project and other things that you can go to and look for. So I'm going to stop the share right now. I'm also going to stop the recording